You're listening to Kicking It with the Koves. Do you have a problem with it?
No, Sensei.
I mean, no, Dad.
No, Dad.
Hey everyone, Jesse Kove here again. I'm sitting next to my dad, Martin Kove, aka John Kreese, Rachel Kove, my twin sister. We've got a great guest today, and we've got Steve Mason with us. He's an amazing man. This guy is so busy. We're just trying to catch up to him. Just a brief synopsis of who this guy is. In 2019, Steve established the Culture Pop podcast with stand-up comic Sue Kalinsky. Since 2014, Steve has co-hosted Mason and Island, the number one rated sports radio show in Los Angeles. Steve co-hosted the nationally broadcasted Late Show with Tom Snyder, anchored Good Day LA on KTTV Fox 11 in Los Angeles, hosted Morning Drive Radio on WNEW in New York, anchored 7 Olympic Games for NBC/Westwood One, longtime president of Flagship Theaters, owner of as many as 26 screens in Southern California, including the celebrated Cinemas Palm de Oro and Palm Desert. Sports, movies, television, business, politics, books. This man does it all. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
You're the entrepreneur of the week, man. I tell you. It's just,
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm a huge fan.
oh, great. Before we begin, I wanted to ask, when I think the classiest thing is for an artist of any kind to own a movie theater. I just think that, owning a movie theater, you can't get any more elaborate than that. And fulfilling one's dreams, whether you're an actor, a musician, a radio personality, it doesn't even matter. Just to have your own theater and throw a movie up on the screen and not have anybody else in the theater, just you laying back and watching Raiders of the Lost Ark or Casablanca or something like that. How did that come about?
Well, I grew up loving movie theaters. There was a neighborhood movie theater that I spent all kinds of time at when I was growing up, and I used to drag my mom to movies. I would trick her into coming to see movies that she wouldn't necessarily like. And years later, a buddy of mine, Bryan Cranston, the actor who was just starting out sort of on Seinfeld and Malcolm in the Middle and that stuff, he approached me with this idea of starting a movie theater company. And he had always wanted to make movies. He had made a movie starring his wife and directed by him, and he wanted a place to show it. And so we kind of built the company around this opportunity for him to show this movie starring his wife, and the chain of theaters just grew and grew.
Was that before? So Bryan Cranston, I'm a huge fan of Bryan Cranston. Breaking Bad, I've binged 3 or 4 times. I think it's one of the most iconic shows and well-scripted shows out there. Did you own that theater before Breaking Bad, or was it after Breaking Bad?
We owned it. We started it in when he was doing Seinfeld. He was playing Jerry the dentist on Seinfeld, and then throughout the time he was on Malcolm, we owned the theaters. And then ultimately, by the time we got to sort of the culmination of the company out in Palm Desert, out in Palm Springs, with this kind of big commercial art house, Brian was Brian, right? He was Heisenberg at that point. So it just so happens that he and I connected when we were much younger, and his career just kept going along with mine.
What was kind of the intention to have the theater? Was it just for, was it something you just really wanted to do as an artist, or is it something you just wanted other people to enjoy? Was it a good business venture at the time?
It turned out to be a good business venture. It's a tough business. It really is, but it turned out to be a great business venture. But, it all started with my love of the movies. There was a foreign language movie called Cinema Paradiso back in the 70s. And it's about this old theater projectionist and this kid who hangs out with them. And, that's sort of where my love of movie theaters and the process was born. But it was a huge passion project for me, especially the one we did out in Palm Springs, which was we did Q&As with actors and directors, and we built like this sort of film community. And it was really, really cool. But it really started for Brian and I, our passion for movies.
I have to ask you, what is your favorite movie?
It is Chinatown.
Wow, that was quick. You must know these. You must get asked these questions a lot.
Yeah, Chinatown is one of my favorites. When I was a little kid, I saw Chinatown, and it captures that period in the 30s in Los Angeles. Jake Gitz, the hard-boiled private detective, and LA at that point, the way it's shot, the way Polanski shot that movie, LA looks so cool. It's like frozen in that 30s, 40s kind of period. And that's really the reason I wanted to live in Los Angeles. In my head, I was thinking, boy, I want to live in the place where Chinatown, the movie, was shot. So yeah, that's my favorite movie. Faye Dunaway, peak of her powers. Nicholson, unbelievable. I love that movie.
One of the greatest lines ever. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
It's Chinatown. Exactly.
It's a wonderful movie. It's just great. I remember seeing that and then calling the casting people. I think it was Mike Fenton cast it, and I just loved it. He did a lot of wonderful stuff for Paramount, I remember, and there was such a brilliant job. I was in town one year and I met him a couple of months earlier, and I just was so taken by the movie. I called him up and just complimented him on what he did casting. The movie was fantastic, just a wonderful picture. Yeah, that and the LA Confidential, kind of of LA Confidential. I like they sort of complement each other. LA Confidential is more 1951, and that's more like in the 30s. But great stuff. It's just that.
Yeah, great stuff. LA Confidential is LA Confidential is sort of the modern day version of Chinatown. They do complement each other really well.
Yeah, and I think they all sourced from Casablanca, personally. I think they all, 1946 Casablanca and having it come out first, I think, by accident, being such a big success, strictly by accident, and, using so many of those actors that were, thrown out of Europe, and they had something to say in that period of time. But yeah, that's you owning your own theater is something man caves, making a little 10-seat screening room, and but you did it, man. I want to own
very jealous
theater,
very jealous.
An old theater, and I'm very jealous because I just want to go and sit there with my friends, smoke cigars, and say, "This is my living room." I don't care about it. If it makes money, doesn't mean. I just want to sit there and live out that fantasy with my son and conceive Westerns and say, and run Westerns in this theater like they were run in the 30s and 40s.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm scared that we're going to lose just the moments of going to theater.
I don't think so. I'm curious what you think, Steve, about that subject particularly, but I feel like, when Spider-Man came out, the new Spider-Man came out, I think it made $1 billion in over, I think, just a couple weeks or 2 weeks. And to me, I was like, yes, the rejuvenation, people going back out to the theater again. And I think I believe that experience will not truly ever die. People like to go out and have dates and see movies on the big screen. Would you agree, Steve, or no?
I still think the movie theater business is going to survive. It's going to be tougher because of all the streaming service and all the quality stuff that is on streaming services. Ultimately, though, there is that sort of that big night out. And I think what movie theaters, and our theater was the first theater in California to have a beer and wine license. I think that's sort of the experience now. Is you get a glass of wine, you get an ice cold beer, you get fancy concessions, like we would hand toss pizzas at this place. I think it now is focused on the experience that you can't get at home when you're watching a movie that happens to be streaming.
Yeah, now they have those seats that like literally buzz
4DX.
and shake.
They try to do it again.
Yeah, the recliners. I think that's sort of where movie theaters are going, to give people an experience that they can't have in their living room.
Get to dress up and all. I'm sure you get this experience. I know I do. I will sit at home with my girlfriend and spend 45 minutes trying to find something that I want to watch, because there's so much, which I'm grateful for. There's a ton to watch, but sometimes I'm just sitting there, I can't decide what to watch. That's why, like, you see a movie, you're like, all right, 7:45, we're going out.
Yep. We've made up our mind. That's our choice. Well, even at home now with streaming stuff, I don't know if you're like this, but it's so easy to hit the pause button in the middle of a movie. And we have a rule at my house: nobody hits the pause button. We're treating it like going to a movie theater. We're not going to take a break, not going to go get a beer, not going to get a glass of wine. We're going to see that movie the way it was meant to be seen.
Well, the mystique, for me, the difference is when we used to go to the movies, and it was a distinctive, there was a distinction between inviting, Tom Selleck into your living room, inviting, Seinfeld into your living room on that small box, and they were your friend. They were once a week coming into your house, and you kind of treated them like your friend. But when we went to the movies and we saw Jack Nicholson in Chinatown, and when we went to see Sean Connery in a Bond film, by the way, it's the Bond film that made the big money first in the theater.
Yeah.
That was the first one where everybody gravitated to, and then everybody felt really great. I remember he was on the cover, the director was on the cover of Hollywood Reporter, and it was an article about how he brought back the people to the theater by making the Bond picture. But then the mystique of the big screen I believe can never be equaled ever when you watch a movie at home. And we all have big screens and all that. But somehow going to the theater and, like what you did, just going to the theater. How many times did you go to the movies when you owned theaters? Did you go to the movies a lot more?
All the time. Although I'll tell you, Marty, I saw 45 movies in theaters this last year, even with COVID. I wore my mask and I did all that stuff, but that's a ritual to me. I would see 2 movies every weekend. Sometimes I'd see a double feature. I mean, I love the experience of walking into a darkened room and sharing it communally with a bunch of people. That's something we need more. Only happens a few places. I'm involved in a couple of them. Sports, we all go to the same place and we all have this communal experience. Church, we all go to the same place. We have this communal experience. And going to the movies, the same thing. We're sharing the same feelings, the same experience together. We really need more of that in society.
In our house, the movie theater is church. For sure.
There you go. Yeah.
Do you find it different when you do the show on ESPN and versus the podcast that you and I did together? How does that ring true? Church and synagogue? Is there a distinctive difference? Is one like a classroom and the other more like a fantasy orientation? How do you feel about the podcast versus doing the ESPN show?
Well, I think there's a different connection because of the podcast, like we're doing right now. This is like a person to person, intimate. We're completely we see each other. We're connected in a real way. You get that from, I think, a podcast, or from, for example, when I'm doing radio. You get a different experience, I think, when you go to church, because there's a messenger, right? It's much more like a movie theater. There's my minister, Dr. Reverend Michael Beckwith. He's sort of channeling and dealing with us directly, as opposed to sort of that intimate friendship that can develop between a radio personality or a podcast host and that listener. A lot of times, when I'm doing my radio show, I think about that one guy in a car in Tarzana or Pomona or Azusa who is listening to me by himself. And that sort of one-on-one relationship that develops as, I share the experiences of my life. He gets to know me, and I wind up being a friend, in his car every day when he's driving around delivering stuff or he's on his way to work.
Speaking of Dr. Michael Beckwith, do you attend Agape?
I do attend Agape. Yes, I do.
I love Michael Beckwith. He is someone I listen to religiously. I mean, I'm a huge meditator and manifester and law of attraction and love and God loving, all of it. So that's so cool. I didn't know that you attend Agape.
Yes, I love Agape. I've had some of my most moving experiences at Agape. In fact, once went to Africa, went to Ghana and Senegal in a group with Dr. Reverend Michael. Which was an amazing experience. We stood at the Cape Coast Castle off the coast of Ghana, and where the door of no return, where Africans were taken as slaves to the New World. I mean, to stand there and to be there with somebody who's such a spiritual and such a moving person to deal with was an amazing experience.
Wow, that just sounds so incredible. Do you attend well, I don't know if they have been doing the gatherings in person yet, but I used to go to the Culver City one. Did you attend that one?
That's where I went all the time. Yeah, I went Sundays and Wednesdays to the Culver City service, and now they're at the Saban Theater in Beverly Hills, but they're not there. You can only get it on the stream. They're not having an audience or a congregation yet.
That bookstore in the Culver City location,
the best.
Oh my God, I could go into that bookstore for hours and I mean, just sit there and read. They probably were annoyed with me because it would take me hours to actually buy something, but I could just sit there for hours and just read every single book on the planet by the Sage, by the Palo Santo. I love it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love that bookstore.
Yeah. So can you share with us a little bit about your story of starting your radio career? I know that you're from Ohio.
Yeah, we have to, the Bengals. I mean, how do we, forget that?
Well, right? I got to tell you, I am a Rams season ticket holder. Even as a little kid, I was a Rams fan growing up in Ohio.
How do you feel about Brady, and what do you think? Why do you think he retired, rather than give it another year or two?
Well, I think at this point, there's not much more he can accomplish, right? He's won 7 Super Bowls, been there 10 times. I think, and he talked about this. He said, and maybe you relate to this in your career too. He talked about the fact that, his career always came first over his family, over his kids, and over his wife. And he felt like it was time for him to change that and allow his kids and his family to get more time with him. It is all consuming to be an NFL football player. Having known guys over the years, it is a 24-hour a day job, and the training is just, nonstop. And it does take you away from your family, and you can't do it halfway. You have to be all in. And I think Tom reached the point where he realized, okay, because of my family, I can't be all in anymore. I've got to devote more time and spend more time with them. So I'm not surprised he retired. I'm sure it's not the way he wanted to go out. I'm sure he wanted to beat the Rams and advance to the Super Bowl and have another shot at it. But I feel like he seemed pretty at peace with his decision. So I think it's been coming for a while.
I read his sign off that he wrote for like the public. I mean, just such a class act, the things he said and who he thanked. And I think he posted on his Instagram, and just such an admirable guy. I mean, the way that he talked about his family and his friends and the journey and where he's at now. So some of what you had just mentioned, I just thought this is the way to go. It's just incredible.
It's rare that number one, he's not really injured. Number two,
right.
Always been clean with his governing the team and throwing, and he doesn't get sacked that much compared to a lot of other players, but he doesn't get hurt very much, and he stays right there, backs up, and he's in the pocket 1 minute and not in the next, and he always is so well cultured in his decision making.
Yes,
as a quarterback, so well knows exactly what he's doing all the time. And I would have thought he would have had it. I didn't think about the family, but I know when the kids were born, I backed up completely from the career. And I started doing these B movies just for paychecks in 1990 when they were born, because I just spent time staring at them in the crib,
Yeah.
Was madly in love with these 2 kids, and it took forever with in vitro and GIF and frozen embryo transplants to have children. And then so I fully understand the need to catch up. And our friend Johnny Lawrence, Billy Zabka, who I do the show with, he's locked in to he lives here in Nashville as well, and he's locked into family. He doesn't want to do anything, no movies, no other shows. And he's the lead on Cobra Kai.
Sure.
So it's really interesting, the dynamic of family, how strong it is for artists, for musicians, for people in radio, for people who are painters. It's amazing how that, I believe the dynamic of family is second to nothing, you know. It's just, you know, brilliant. It's just what keeps us going and makes the art and what we do even better, you know.
I totally do. I totally do. And family, you know, I mean, it's funny with the pandemic. You know, it could go two ways, right? I mean, you could either your family and you could have issues, or you realize you were just meant to be together. For me, I don't have kids, but I'm in a relationship, and I realize, you know, we do well together. You know, even cooped up, even locked up in the same house for a period of time, we do really well together. So there was something reaffirming that came through from that pandemic about our love and our relationship, and really means something.
Well, I think it forces people to connect. It forces people because you're in isolation. So it's forcing people to connect with oneself, and it's forcing people to connect with their spouses and their partners. And it's been a challenge, I think, for a lot of people. But I think it's beautiful that you've taken it as an opportunity to get closer with your partner. And that's one positive thing I think has come out of this pandemic, is that it's forced people to connect with their loved ones, or even just put that at kind of the, just, you know, right here, I need to connect. We all need it. And that's what I love, how you were describing the need for community, and how are we going to create that in our society right now? Is it sports? Is it going to Agape? Everyone needs that community. And I think people really need to be reminded of that we're tribal beings in need of that bonding, which is with COVID, obviously.
Equally to Tom Brady's success, you were voted most likely to succeed in your high school when you in Ohio.
Yeah,
and look at you now.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I did get that recognition when I was in high school, and I was just always like a total go for it kid. Like when I was 15 years old, I bought 5 minutes of radio time at a local radio station, and I did a sportscast every single day. And I paid for the show by going out and selling advertisements. So as a 15-year-old, here I am buying time on a radio station, then going door to door and finding somebody to advertise so I could actually pay for it. I was a little hustler of a kid. And I'm sure that's one of the things that led to being voted most likely to succeed, because I was driven as a kid. I really knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be on the radio, and I was unbelievably focused on it.
Where do you think you learned that hustle from?
It's a really good question. I'll be honest and say, I had a challenging relationship with my dad, and I spent a lot of time trying to prove to my dad that I was a great kid, that I was a hard worker, because my dad he caroused. He was a partier. So I didn't see him all that much. And I just wanted to get his attention. And that's one of the ways I did it, was being out there and really being a hustler and creating stuff that would catch his eye and get him to pay attention to what we were doing in the family. So I would say that's probably what drove me to be a hustler when I was a kid.
Thank you for your vulnerability on that. I appreciate it. And I think it's amazing, like, what motivates us, though, because if it wasn't for that, right, you wouldn't have had this drive, and now you have all this success, and, you know, you're so diverse in where you are taking your success. I mean, now you have this podcast on pop culture, and I just love it. I really appreciate all of that. And it's like taking our pain and then turning it into magic, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I often say, and I got close to my dad later in his life. He passed away a couple of years ago, but I got a lot closer to my dad. And I have him to really thank for me being so driven and to get where I am. So, yeah, we reached a very positive relationship before he passed away. And I do have him to thank. He was, you know, it was that being that driven was the reason why I got to where I got.
That's really so beautiful. Yeah. And can you tell us the journey going out to Los Angeles?
Sure. I did morning radio. I did morning radio in Toledo, Ohio when I was pretty young.
By the way,
And I was,
people know morning radio is really hard. Like you're up early as hell. And I've been privy to being, around the radio stuff. And people don't know enough about radio. It is a pretty grueling job, especially for those morning talk shows. You guys are up at the crack of dawn, before the crack.
yes.
I mean, and for years or weeks on end, I mean, it's unbelievable. You guys are up at like 2, 3 in the morning, ready to go. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, morning radio is tough. And somebody in LA heard me and decided, you know what, we see unbelievable potential there. We see somebody who can grow with our company. So they hired me to do mornings at the all sports radio station in Los Angeles. And the truth is, I started doing it, and about 6 months in, they said, you know what, you're not what we expected. And they put me on at night. And for about 3 years, I was on from 7 to midnight every night. And I kind of found my voice during that time. And at the end of 3 years, they came back to me and said, will you move back to mornings? And I think it's because I worked really hard. It's because I was on late at night and I got to develop my personality and my skills a lot. And at the end of the day, it was exactly what it's like the Stones. You don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. I needed to be on at night to find my voice and to wind up back in morning drive those 3 years later.
When you initially went down to nighttime, what was that like for you? Did you lose your confidence a little? Did you take it as just an opportunity to learn more? How did you respond to that?
I was devastated. I mean, the truth is I was devastated because morning drive is like the most high profile place you can be on a radio station. And so I developed kind of a screw it kind of attitude. Like, I'm just going to let it all go. I'm just going to say whatever and be whatever. And I think that's where the growth happened. The growth happened from learning to not try to control everything, not trying to be perfect, being real and being honest on the air. When I think about the great radio personalities, people like, Howard Stern and, all the greats, they all were willing to put their lives out there on the air. And that's what I started to do when I went to nighttime. I talked about my life, my day. We did lots of sports and all that stuff. Which was the main calling card. But I also talked about life. And I talked openly about, how I really felt like I should have stayed in morning drive. I don't know why they moved me, but people love the honesty of that. So I think that's what I learned, was that authenticity, which really connects people when they hear you on the radio.
Well, I think authenticity and vulnerability gives people permission to be authentic and vulnerable with themselves. And it's exciting because people want to hear real human truth and what people are going through. Don't you think?
There's no question about it. And, I've talked about some stuff on the air that, I came out as gay on the air in 2014 at ESPN. That was a huge deal. I talked about, I've wrestled with bipolar disease for a bunch of my life. I talk openly about that. So I've really, learned to become an advocate in both of those areas. And it also lets people know me. And I think the really great radio personalities, you feel like you know them because they lay it all out there on the line. And I think that's what has made me, the success that I am, is that you said vulnerability, that willingness to be vulnerable and to be real and to be honest, I think is one of the reasons why I've gotten to this spot.
So yeah, and I thank you for everything you just shared. I love and relate to so much. I've been working in mental health for 13 years, and that's something I teach my clients all the time. If you want to heal, if you want to build confidence, if you want to build self-love, you have to start being honest and sharing how you're feeling. And there's such relief in that. And there's such bonding, and it opens people up and connects people in the most beautiful and intimate way. So I so appreciate everything you just shared. And I also, recently I spoke with, so I'm an athlete myself. I played soccer for 15 years. I went all the way up to semi-pro and then I stopped. And I recently spoke with the head coach at Pepperdine for the women's soccer team. I spoke with him for an hour and we were talking about what it's like being a coach, but also something that athletes innately have, which is the ability to be knocked down and get back up.
Right.
And I just think that's so it's not just unique to athletes, but it's ingrained in them because from the moment they were 4 years old, they're literally, all they're doing is making mistakes, getting knocked down, getting back up. And I think that's what you did with, when you went from night, from day to morning to night. And I love that that's how you responded to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an expression, the fall down 7 times, get up 8. I think that's a Chinese proverb. I mean, that applies to sports, that applies to life. And the other one, Sean McVay, who I've gotten to know from talking to over the years, the head coach of the Rams, he always says a setback is a setup for a comeback. There's also that element in sports because, I'm a big baseball fan. As a batter, you fail over a third of the time usually. And it's how you deal with that failure. It's how you deal with that slump. It's how you deal with your struggles that is really the measure of a man. So yeah, I totally get that.
I think, Dad, you almost went pro in baseball, didn't you?
Or soccer.
You were pretty close. We love baseball too. Absolutely love it. I played baseball when I was younger. I could throw the whole field. I was a catcher and right field. It was literally some of the best memories of my life, baseball.
Yeah, that was my game too.
Yeah, baseball.
Me too.
I enjoyed throwing from the outfield. I played, initially in the Broadway Show League, which was a softball league, and it was in Central Park. And I used to play center field, and I had such a good time pegging that ball in. I mean, to me, it was better than hitting a home run. I loved just winging it in there, and I was really good with my shoulder, my arm, and now I've got implants, all over the body, because you can look at old movies you did with stunts that you were getting punched and falling down, and you see yourself lofting in the air instead of just falling down like I normally would now, because then you were young and full of, piss and vinegar and you wanted to. But soccer, I was a goalie. It was the only thing I could do to get close to football. And my parents were very conservative and they didn't want me really playing football. So I played soccer and worked out with a coach who handled really a lot of foreigners on his high school, Newtown High School. And I went to a very conservative high school that didn't have a very good team. But I loved tackling all these forwards and center forwards, and they would just come on, and I just loved tackling them with the ball. And I was asked to play in the German-Hungarian, a pro league. And I realized that it was really tough watching these guys play. I mean, they were so good, these Europeans, and it was indoors and it was in New York. And I said to myself, I would play Jack Palance roles the rest of my life if I got nailed by one of these guys in the mouth, And then I realized, wanting to be an actor was more important than a professional soccer player. But I had a great experience watching Rachel play soccer. I mean, I liked watching female games more than male games because somehow there was something about the machismo of these girls just attacking each other and playing so well and having finesse and popping the ball where you expect it from the male team. You expect all that toughness. And I enjoyed watching Rachel play in Beverly Hills High School. I mean, it wasn't a very good team, but she was just so much fun to watch.
Oh my God, that's definitely not my favorite team I played for. All my love to Beverly Hills High School. There's, Ryan Franks, I love you so much, but that was a tough time.
I know we have you for just a short period of time today, and I wanted to ask you before we leave, you're so inspirational how you got started. I wanted to know, there are so many people that have no idea how to break into into radio, into even doing podcasts. And I'd love it if you could just maybe give some of your advice or your experience of what they can do. Like you said, go buy some time and get out there.
Yeah, that's absolutely one way to do it. I mean, I have a friend who went out and bought time to be able to call high school games on a station here in LA and sells all the ads. That's a great hustle. That's a great hustle. It's hard, but it's a great hustle. Otherwise, I would say, and I've been, I mean, proudly, I've been able to mentor a lot of people over the years in the business. And the one thing that I would recommend to anybody who wants to break into radio, television from a broadcasting perspective is intern, hang around, become friends with people in the business. It's always about, and Marty, you know this, networking is like unbelievably important. It's amazing to me the number of former interns that I see doing really well in the business, and guys that just hung around the radio station or hung around the TV station until their number was called. That's my best advice. In terms of podcasting, you know, there are lots of how-to videos on how to start a podcast. As you guys know, it's not an easy setup. I mean, it's hard. It can require help, all that stuff. But you know, it's really democratized broadcasting. You know, if you're out there and you're really hungry to do a show, you can definitely set up your own podcast and do it. But ultimately, it comes down to confidence and drive. Confidence and drive. And I always say the one rule I have in life is never be outworked. I'm going to work. I may not have the most talent in the world, but I am going to work harder than anybody. And that's Tom Brady. That's anybody who's great. You work harder than anybody. That's never the reason why I'm not going to succeed.
Amen. It almost sounds like a Cobra Kai slogan there.
It is. It's Cobra Kai slogan. Right. Cobra Kai never dies. I mean,
yeah.
Right there.
I love it. And is there anything else as well that you're pursuing right now on top of everything that you're doing, the mountain that you're standing upon? Is there other things that personally you're trying to achieve or do with your show or other things?
Yeah, I am writing a novel right now. And I'm probably halfway, I don't want to jinx it, but I'm about halfway through a novel about baseball, about a kid who plays Little League and who's learning the game from an old minor leaguer who's sort of helping out as the head coach of the Little League team. So I'm in the middle. That's sort of the next frontier for me is, you know, I've got the podcast, obviously I've got the show, and now the novel is sort of my next focus of things.
When the Dodgers moved here, what was your feeling when they moved from Brooklyn? Because I lived in Brooklyn when they moved.
Sure.
When they moved to Los Angeles, and I'm always interested to see how Los Angeleans or people who lived here truly, or even people who lived out of the state, felt about that transition, because it was how many decades did they live? And,
Sure.
60, 70 years. And for me, it was very sad. I think I told that story, to you breaking into Ebbets Field when I was on your show.
Yes, you did.
But how did you feel about that transition? And what was it like the first year the Dodgers were here?
I feel like it's a little bit like the Rams, right? The NFL was gone for 22 years and went to St. Louis. There's a public trust that exists between franchises and their fans. And really, the fans are the owners of football teams, baseball teams, professional sports franchises. I heard Mark Cuban talk about this last week, that's the difference between owning a team and owning another business, is that the team is really owned by the fans. And so I was excited to have a baseball team here on the West Coast, and to have the Dodgers, and to have Chavez Ravine and all that stuff. My heart broke for everybody back in Brooklyn because they had invested their blood, sweat, tears, money into that franchise for all those years. But there came a time where baseball felt like it needed to move west. From a baseball perspective, capturing the number 2 market in America, I'm sure was really important and took a priority. But I do feel badly for everybody in Brooklyn who, used to go to Ebbets Field and spend their money on tickets, and like you said, broke into Ebbets Field one time. I mean, there's a public trust that exists with a professional sports franchise, and it was broken there.
Interesting, because I was 11 when, my friend and I broke into, and it was the month they left, and it was done out of resentment for the decision. But then again, it's interesting to hear that you were sensitive and appreciated the loss, because everybody wasn't a big loss there. I mean, You know, there was some culture, just the culture about Brooklyn. Brooklyn is like an underdog entity that raises itself politically and socially above its reputed value. You know, it's a very special place, even today, you know, and even today. Jesse and I went back and played Hasidic Jews in a movie where we worked with the underground, the mob in Brooklyn in the 80s. It was
Wow.
it was a wild, wild ride, and we just had such a good time with payas and beards and everything. And we did it in Yiddish. It was a lot of fun. We did it back in September. But
Wow, crazy.
it was wild, really wild.
I have one question for myself as an entrepreneur myself, and I really just respect everything you're doing. How do you stay balanced in everything that you're doing? What do you think? What's one thing you can tell people on how to stay balanced and how to handle all of the various adventures that you're doing?
Well, I would say this: for one weekend every month, I turn off everything. I turn off my TV, I turn off my computer, I turn off my phone. I'm not reachable. And I just use it to clear my head. We are so connected to all of our gadgets all the time. I will spend 14 hours on my laptop today, probably by the end of the show and by the end of everything I do today. So I find that one weekend a month with no technology is a great way to refresh your mind and sort of reboot what's going on in your head. That's a piece of advice that's sort of counterintuitive. In other words, do more by doing less. But it's really healthy for your brain, I think. It's healthy for everybody, I think, to take 1 weekend a month and just turn everything off and reconnect with your partner, your family, all that stuff. I think is really, really important.
That is profound advice.
Steve, you're an ace, man.
Yeah.
You're an ace. We just so appreciate you being here. I want to make sure people know where to find you. SteveMason.com, also on Twitter. You can find him at Steve Mason or Venice Mace, right? At Instagram and Twitter as well. And we just so appreciate you being here, man.
Oh, absolutely. I love being here. Huge fan of Cobra Kai. Love the show. Love the life values that Cobra Kai teaches. A lot of the stuff that we talked about here. New generation of fans being introduced to that, and I'm a huge fan. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. That's my slogan in life.
Drew Brees, did you see the Drew Brees video when he did that in the
No,
hub?
I didn't. No.
I gotta send that to you. It's well, you and I we'll all get together when we're back in LA. I would love to have coffee. Go to the movies, especially.
Agape.
Yeah.
I want to go to the movies with you. So anyway, we'll get that out to you. Thank you guys so much. That was Steve Mason here
Steve, thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Go ahead, of course.
You're wonderful. You really are wonderful. And all these entrepreneurial moments of just having your own theater, and then, 1 week away, we were discussing that yesterday, just too much business. And we need to stop and just absorb life a little bit more, because it's exciting what's going on. But you have to create a balance. It's so important that you create this balance. It's invaluable.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Marty, Rachel, Jesse, thank you so much for having me on.
Take care, guys. This is Kicking It with the Koves.